A gold mine in northern KwaZulu-Natal is transforming the lives of former Zamazamas by employing them as artisanal miners or contractors. Now, Bosveld Gold Mine near Pongola is working with former illegal miners in an effort to strengthen the local economy in the area and avoid bloodshed. Joining us now is the CEO of the mine, Quinton George. Mr. George, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us on Hilaal Live.
Pleasure, Fahraaz. Thanks for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Mr. George, I mean, when everyone looks at, when we talk of Zamazamas, when the word Zamazama comes around, it's always the assertion that, yeah, it is these guys who are really causing destruction to the economy. What did the mine do in order to bring them into the legal way of mining and hence, of course, offering them formal employment?
I think, firstly, we had to realize that the problem existed and would never go away. We were in a very rural community where a lot of people were desperate for work, hungry, and the reality is a lot of our gold is at surface. It is a greenstone deposit, so there are areas which do carry some quite high grade, and it can be extracted artisanally and in the informal way that they do. So it was really a case of saying, if the problem's not going to go away, how do we make the problem a solution and work together and get them to realize that we aren't just trying to arrest them and get rid of them, which we tried for the first year or two, and it was almost impossible, and rather bring them into the net and find models and find solutions which suit them, suit us, adhere to the law, and become sustainable and something that's in the common interests of all parties in the area. Because at the end of the day, while their activity is illegal, they are stakeholders. They live in the community, we operate in their community, and we have to find solutions together.
Mr. George, I mean, you talk about sustainability, and I think that's where it all comes together. How were you able to convince these miners that, look here, I know you've been doing these illegalities within what you were doing for quite some time. Come into the formal sector and let's try and make something work, because at the end of the day, like you mentioned, there's a community to be looked after, and the community itself can reap these rewards.
Well, I think the real effort came after quite an unpleasant confrontation where the mine was attacked a few years ago. Equipment was burnt, staff were injured, firearms were used, so it was very unpleasant. And we decided to engage some of the leaders, and between us said it's much better to work together, find out what their needs are, what our concerns are, and find a way in which they can work together. So we've got two models that we operate at the moment. The one is probably nearly 200 of the illegal miners have been put into contracting cooperatives where they move material for us in very specific areas that we drill and blast, make sure it's safe, make sure they're wearing PPE, and we reward them on a rate per ton. So they're incentivized to be productive. If they don't work, they don't get paid. But at least the areas they're working in are supported by us, made as efficient as possible so that they are more productive. And the other areas is a smaller portion, probably 30 of them, which is very specialized chipping crew in higher grade areas, which are often areas they've been aware of, they found in areas we weren't previously mining and we'd overlooked. They were trying to get to them illegally, and when we said to them, we'll help you get access and make sure it's at least safe so that it complies with the law. On that basis, we give them a percentage of contained gold, and we show them the price we sell it at through the Rand refinery. It's taken about a year and a half to just slowly build up. It's quite lucrative for them. It supports underground operations. It's not the main thrust of our business at the moment. Most of it is open cast surface operations, but illegal activity is a real pain. It really does frustrate your operations. So a lot of this is to make sure those people desperate for work, desperate for income, hungry, have a basis on which they can work with us. And instead of running from our security, now our security actually looks after them, make sure that their material's not stolen, and that they're sort of fully integrated into operations. And it's working. It's not perfect. There's always problems. We often deal with it, every few weeks, there's an issue and we just sit down together and work it out. So it's a work in progress, but it's a lot better than where we were 4 years ago.
Mr. George, you of course now set some sort of a blueprint for this to happen. How does other mines, along with various other stakeholders within government, like the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, Department of Labor, now say, okay, we've seen what Bosveld Mine has done. Let's try and use that blueprint for other mines across South Africa to make sure that the stem of zama-zamas and illegal mining is eradicated once and for all. Do you think that there is a realistic chance of this happening across all mines in South Africa?
Well, I think in gold in particular, where the price is high, my view is it's only going to get higher. And it's one of the commodities that with all the uncertainty globally is set for much higher prices. So if guys are acting as zama-zamas and mining illegally, they're clearly earning a living and they're making money. So the problem is not going to go away. And it can't be dealt with by the police, by the army. I just think it's on such a large scale, particularly in the reef, that there has to be a different solution. Mining companies can't simply increase their security budgets and try and police it themselves, because I just think the scale of it's almost on a military scale. So a different approach has to be taken. And if these guys are mining in assets that have been neglected or derelict or ignored, and they continue to do it, they must be making money. So in my opinion, if they're given more support, more engagement with regulators, the government, official mining companies, I think it's going to be safer for them. They should be more productive. And there's got to be a basis under which it, at worst, stops the illegal activity in specific areas of other mining companies, because they're supporting these zama-zamas. I call them artisanal miners. I think zama-zama is a sort of negative connotation. But I think if you start a process of bringing into the net where you can give them something that improves their lives, improves their position, regulates them, it sort of makes it a bit more sustainable, a little bit safer. Like I said, it's not a one-size-fits-all, but I think there has to be an approach to engage them to say, guys, how can we help you so that it avoids you just being an illegal pain in the neck for us? And that's what we've tried to do. And I just think that, you know, for a lot of the other mining companies, I mean, their problems are slightly different. In very deep mines, the risks are much higher, the safety issues are much more extensive, and I think a lot of the mining companies are probably scared of that. But like I said, where this activity is prolific, it wouldn't be prolific if people weren't making a living from it and weren't making money from it. And they're often assets that have been ignored or neglected or derelict. And as I said, that poses a huge risk to the people mining it, to the communities around them, to the mines on which these lease areas often sit. And I just think it has to be, you know, an approach that is taken to bring them into the net, even if it's not overnight. And you know, I'm personally quite surprised that, and I'm not really looking for friends or not looking for medals or recognition. I'm just surprised we haven't had more engagement by government and by people responsible for this, for dealing with this problem than we've had thus far. It does surprise me, but like I said, I'm not looking for friends or recognition. I just think we've developed a bit of a model that's solving our problems, and I'm sure lots can be learned to deal with the problem in other areas in the country.
Yeah, well, I think if there's anything to try and stem illegal mining and, of course, bring the artisanal miners to the formal industry, then definitely this blueprint has set the standard. Mr. George, thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal Live.
Fahraaz, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. That's Quinton George, the CEO of Bosveld Mines in Pongola, KwaZulu-Natal. After the break, I'll have your latest in news. Do stay tuned.